Hi guys, thanks for tuning into another episode of Nuggets News as we continue our Evil Elite series and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. We've got plenty of good news to get through and we've got some disappointing news as well. Trump's been in for 48 hours now. We haven't got the Epstein list, which was one of the things I was waiting for. And just breaking this morning, he's just announced $500 billion of funding for AI, and one of the focuses being mRNA technology, which is absolutely something we did not want to see. So let's get into all this and I'll talk about it a little bit more. Some of the positive news, it does seem like some of this censorship is being rolled back and free speech is being restored to some degree on more platforms. Whether or not Mark Zuckerberg's just sucking up after he knows he's going to get in trouble down the pike, we'll wait and see there. But let's get into some of the theories that are going around at the moment with everything that's happening, because I definitely think that the Great Awakening is happening. More people than ever are questioning everything, and a lot of these conspiracies are becoming things that people are openly discussing and being open-minded to, which is great. And we see Rogan and comedians and the drip feed coming through these different channels now to get the truth out to people on these issues that no one wanted to even touch a few years ago. But I think the biggest one has been obviously everything happening in the UK with British PMs voting against an inquiry into all this grooming and these horrific crimes that have been reported in Britain and the connections to Keir Starmer and so on. So all this child trafficking stuff I've been talking about a lot. It all ultimately ties back to Epstein, and now people are questioning the connections to, you know, the royals and all that thing that we've seen come out here and there over the years with different royals and those involved being named. People that are good friends with Jimmy Savile, one of the worst, who never got in trouble. So people are asking, well, how does this stuff, how can people get away with this for decades? And obviously, you know, it requires that a lot of the evil elites be in on this gig and cover it all up. So it is great to see topics like this being the most trending on places like podcasts and X and that type of thing. We had 50 UK pedos named in Labour, so it's obviously something there. And again, why would you not want an investigation into this? The only reason is to cover it up. So other places around Europe, we're getting some different sentiments and shifts there as the EU try to control everything and roll out this new world order agenda and the plans of all these big NGOs. This is the former EU Commissioner admitting that they did step in and cancel the election in Romania. There's been hundreds of thousands of Romanians going out into the streets protesting because they feel that Karlan Georgescu has been rightfully elected, but he wasn't going to toe that mainstream line. And so the higher powers in the EU step in and say, we're not going to allow this. Candace Owens has been relentlessly trying to shine the light on all of these different issues and the leaders behind them. So she's covered Trudeau, the Obamas, and more recently the controversy around Emmanuel Macron and saying how they're all gay. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but this is all part of pushing this transgender LGBTQ on the kids and rolling this stuff out and trying to normalize it all. So why would you be lying about it? And Candace has been digging deep. She's been getting these legal letters back and forward, but she's not backing off this stuff. And if you do look into it, Brigitte Macron said her head was a mess when she was 40 and Emmanuel Macron was 15 at the time, which again is against the law at the time and against the law still now. So we'll see what comes of her investigation there and the legal battle. Justin Trudeau is another one that stepped down. He's had to pay hush money in the past. If you've been down this rabbit hole, you'll know that the father of one of the victims wasn't covered by an NDA, and he's been speaking out about this, things that happened when Trudeau was a school teacher. So we'll see if more comes out of that as well. James Woods putting in his 2 cents here, and some of you will know that there's a connection here between Justin Trudeau and Fidel Castro if you have been down that rabbit hole. Over to Poland now, where one of the politicians who's running for president this year has openly said that, it's Israel and America that are controlling Europe and the world, and it's coming to an end. So, if he gets elected, are the EU going to step in there and say, no, we're not going to allow it, Russian interference or whatever card they're going to play. But it's just super interesting to see these high-profile politicians finally calling out this stuff people have been too scared to talk about. Now, one of the reasons I've started this series was because there was a lot of hope around Trump getting in and promising to release the Epstein list. Now, they're still saying they're going to do it, but, we didn't get it on day one, which was promised. So, as I've been saying, actions speak louder than words. We have to watch what they're doing, not what they're saying. And that goes for all politicians, obviously. But still talking about full disclosure over JFK and a lot of these files and, even 9/11 and the NASA phenomenon stuff. People are really interested to know what's in these covered up files that haven't been released. Putin's formally accused, the Obama, Biden, Clinton, Soros, all these NGOs of this bioweapon production in Ukraine. I've spoken about this before. There's way more going on in Ukraine than what is being surface level reported by the media, and all these ties to different companies and the flows of money. And it's no coincidence that the last pardon that Biden did was of Fauci, also of Hunter, that extended back to 2014. And this is when all the biolab stuff started in Ukraine, the connections to Obama, the CIA, the deep state, and so on. Now, there is theories going around that maybe the 2020 election wasn't legitimate, and we'll get into that in just a second, and how that's going to maybe affect some of these pardons that Biden's done, because, look, he's done so much more than any other president in history. Thankfully, one of the first pardons Donald Trump has done is Ross Ulbricht. So a bit of a positive there for all crypto lovers and freedom lovers. Great to see Ross finally released. All right, so another interesting tidbit here that's been trending is Catherine Herridge went to Gitmo, and this is where one of the theories has been that there's going to be a lot of military-style tribunals at Gitmo for those that have committed these gross crimes against humanity, the child trafficking stuff, if indeed Fauci and Gates and Pfizer knew that they were lying about the safety and efficacy of those products and so on. So really interesting. We've got a huge news reporter that's talking about going there, and this isn't a place that you can just go publicly. You need to have clearance to go here, and she's talking about these military trials that are coming. So stay tuned there. General Flynn has been talking about AIPAC and Israel's influence over US politics. This is also something that wasn't almost being censored on X a month or so ago, and it's very much come to the table as a conversation, and people looking at what's happening in Gaza with absolutely being flattened, and the thousands of people that are dying there, Palestinians, and nobody wants war, but we want to live peacefully and happily and just to be left alone. And this is one of the real reasons that people are saying that the TikTok is being banned in the US and different places. So it's not about Chinese influence or data. It's about these are the top trending topics. And this is not what the powers that be want, that want war and that type of thing. They don't want all these messages of peace and the youth watching all these things and taking a side against Israel. So Trump has always spoken about how Israel is our greatest ally, but then he did share this clip of Jeffrey Sachs openly talking about Obama and Netanyahu orchestrating wars. You can go down this rabbit hole. Ian Carroll's done a great ratio here with Elon, again, saying they're our greatest ally, and Ian really outlined here all the inner workings and what's going on, the strings that Israel and the control that they have now over pretty much all Western democracies and the world. Now, Netanyahu didn't get invited to Donald Trump's inauguration, which is interesting of itself. Just today, we did get the news that Trump's going to cut all foreign aid except Israel. So again, I'm still on the fence with how this is playing out, and it's one to watch. Another monumental drop that we got during the week was this JFK assassination tape. Never before heard audio of those close, Clifton Carter, LBJ, admitting that they hired Mac Wallace to assassinate JFK. Now, this is something that RFK has spoken about a lot, thinking that there's CIA or deep state involved in some way or another. So, again, the truth on certain issues is coming out, while it appears other things they're not following through on their promises. So again, we've got to wait and see how this all plays out. If it's a gradual awakening, or they're just going to go back to their old ways and not follow through on all the promises on the things that they were going to release. We got another whole batch of WikiLeaks files that are now dumped online. So as they said there, it's an absolute fist of Hillary emails, Vegas shooting, all the stuff in the Middle East, HIV, CIA false flags, the pandemic. So you guys can have a look at those files and have a search for them on X yourself if that interests you. And there's a number of former heads of the FBI all confirming that this type of stuff was orchestrated by the highest levels of government. And so there are people out there, it's great to see, huge accounts that are getting this out and getting these views out to hundreds of thousands of people. So that's why I'm still holding hope that this great awakening is going to continue, even though it's obviously never going to be easy to wake up all the masses. And don't forget, this is a painting, some artwork owned by Jeffrey Epstein, with George Bush here with the paper plane and the two towers collapse with another plane there. As I've said, the reason that this Epstein list has been covered up for so long is because this really is the tip of the iceberg for CIA and Israel Mossad connections, the child trafficking stuff. Again, so I really want to see that list come out and be released. Another FBI director here talking about how Obama's Department of Justice forced the deletion of 500,000 fugitives, many pedos, from these background checks and from the databases in the FBI. So a lot of inside corruption there. Pam Bondi, who is the new Attorney General, has promised to release the Epstein list and said that there's no legal reason that it can't be done unless they're a victim or cooperating in some way. So she seems like a bit of a badass if you watch some of the clips of her during the week. And there's no surprise why some of the politicians don't want her to get in because they're involved with these emails between Schiff, Epstein, Hillary, Podesta, all that type of stuff, if you've been down the Pizzagate rabbit hole. All right, we'll just wait a second for these to load. Okay, so continuing on here. This is one of the artists who made these cartoons calling out Trump and obsessing over him for being this bad guy, and he himself, the artist, was just arrested for CP there. Now, this is the issue I wanted to talk about just before in terms of Biden and the amount of pardons that he's given. Now, we're hearing these reports that there's now enough evidence and the Brunson case to prove that the 2020 election was fraudulent. Now, if that is the case and Biden wasn't a legitimate president, how does that affect the pardons? There's other people saying that now Fauci's pardoned, he can't plead the fifth and try and use silence as a shield when on the stand or whatever. So there's a lot of routes for these bad guys still to get prosecuted by the letter of the law, even though they have been pardoned. Okay, so Mel Gibson, again, he loves speaking truth and he's someone that's been cancelled in the past, but this podcast with Rogan had a lot of interesting content. And as I've said numerous times here, Mel Gibson's been calling out the Satanism and pedophilia and corruption in Hollywood, and that for many, many years now. And he was talking about the connection with the Pope and the Vatican and all the stuff we've seen there. We've seen it in Australia with some of our popes and whatever. It seems just to be so systemic and covered up by the media. So again, a positive when the biggest podcast in the world is shining a light and bringing these issues to people's attention. As I just said, I think this is everywhere, and it was no surprise to me when we saw Victorian police, 700 of them being named in these allegations and looking into this type of stuff as well. I'm sure Australia's got a dark history like everywhere does. And this was another interesting point here with magistrates in Australia being advised to give light sentences to pedos to avoid their deportation, because if the sentence is over 12 months, they get deported. So trying to encourage them to give 15 months, 11 months, sorry. Just crazy stuff, judge people on the crimes they've committed. We shouldn't be trying to give lighter sentences to these type of people. Meanwhile, people in the UK and around the world have been thrown in jail for tweets and expressing opinions while they're trying to claim that freedom of speech is alive and well. Okay, so last one I wanted to say here in relation to Australia. I know plenty of you are interested in Port Arthur, and this is a new series that's dropped on YouTube. You can find it. Again, the fact that this is allowed on YouTube and not being censored gives me hope that the truth about all different topics is gradually being allowed to be spoken about again in all places. As far as I'm aware, YouTube, owned by Google, haven't fully repealed their censorship like others have. But yeah, this is now 3 episodes out if you want to check out this series by Paul Moda. All right, so one of the biggest news items was obviously these LA fires. And I've said in previous weeks that things are going to keep getting crazier and crazier. And it feels like we're watching this movie play out. And it is waking people up, but there's also some nefarious plans that are underlying all of this. So, this is, hopefully you've been across all of this, but just things like the amount of funding that they cut. James, we're talking about the insurance companies culling their policies just a few months ago, sorry. None of this, I don't think, is coincidence. They wanted LA to be a smart city by 2028. Trump, again, was on Rogan a while ago talking about this in advance. The water reservoirs had been drained to save a rare species of fish. The fire hydrants hadn't been tested. Obviously, the use of DEI to hire through equity rather than just the best people for the job. So, there's so much to look into here. Let me know what you guys think about it all in the comments. Is it just a coincidence? And what sort of, do you think we just need to be back to common sense stuff and hiring the best people for the job? Particularly when it comes to things like firefighting and, being physically capable of carrying people out of fires to save their lives and that type of thing. So the FBI shut down its DOI office immediately there with Kash Patel. So again, true equality is just hiring the best people for the job without any judgment on race or gender or creed or background, anything like that. And that's what we need to get back to. Okay, so this was interesting. Elon seems to be, retweeting and highlighting these different issues here and there as the most followed person on Twitter to bring attention to things. And this is just stirring the pot for those of you that have looked into the history of Nikola Tesla and all these documents that got taken by one of the intelligence agencies, it is believed, and they haven't been released. But he was good friends with Trump's uncle, brilliant MIT scientist. So there's some wild theories going around there about if, some of the technology that Tesla was working on and whose hands it's actually in now. Is it the deep state, or could it be, the Trump camp? Is he just part of the deep state? These are all questions that we're waiting to see play out. But I definitely believe that there's been plenty of energy, engines and things we've seen over the years that have been suppressed. And you can go and look at all the patents, and it's actually in the US legal framework that if someone invents something that's a threat to national security or the economy, which obviously includes big oil and that type of thing, the military or the insiders can buy that patent and stop you from releasing it. So none of this stuff is conspiratorial. You can go and look this all up yourself with the US patents on different energy and engines and different tech we've had over the years that isn't being released to the public. Just this week we had China unveiling a mini nuclear battery with a 50-year supply. Okay, so speaking of somewhere with plenty of energy that seems to pay the most in the world because of how poorly run our country is, Australia will need gas imports this year. Despite having hundreds of years of gas reserves and all these privately owned companies making billions of dollars in profits, we don't get any of it ourselves. And this is compared to places like Norway that have these huge strategic reserves and sovereign wealth funds from the sale of their commodities and resources. And it's a no-brainer that Australia should have done something like this and should do. But like everywhere, our politicians are run by the corporations and the money. So there are places that have gone away from this sort of New World Order agenda and not been run by the evil elites. So it's great to see El Salvador announcing that the government will pay 95% of your water and electricity bills in January for households, not businesses. Again, looking after the little guy and their people. This is amazing to see. Let's hope others follow. Argentina's just hit a record trade surplus in his first year. Who would have thought this would have happened with the position that Argentina were in with hyperinflation, and it's cooling down from the changes that they're making. Let's see if that continues. And obviously they've cut regulations, jobs, and they're saying here that they're going to help Trump and Musk with their Department of Government Efficiency, cutting out hopefully regulations and bureaucracy, red tape, and all that type of thing to make it easier to start a small business and for the everyday person. Here's another person in Japan, Prime Minister Abe, who was assassinated following after not following all the World Economic Forum orders, didn't push mandates, vaccines, and returned 1 million doses. Gave the citizens ivermectin, so no surprise why he was assassinated there. Back to some positive news where we've got these reps pushing for the ban of seed oils, high fructose corn syrup, all these different additives and things that we know are bad for us. But for some reason, they're all banned in Europe, but they're still being allowed in America and places like Australia. Thankfully, with RFK here pushing a lot of this stuff, they've finally banned red dye 3, citing cancer concerns. Again, banned in Europe, still used in Australia. Mel Gibson was also shedding the light on ivermectin and fenbendazole, which has had some new studies come out, which I've covered in previous episodes. There's a lot of promise around this. Plenty of legitimate doctors and legitimate studies now showing promise with these drugs, everything from parasites, cancer, other things. So let's see what the actual true research, unbiased research shows when we get more evidence around this type of thing. Another interesting one I want to throw in here, this was evidence showing that soothing music like Beethoven's Symphony No. 5 can have an effect on cancer cells, a 20% reduction in just a few days. So, if you've been down these sort of rabbit holes before, you'll know that music can affect the structure of water and ice crystals, the way plants grow and all that type of thing. So everything around us is energy and frequency, and I think this is a whole area of science that we definitely need to be looking into and focusing on more for healing, for energy, for everything. Dutch farmers were out in force protesting Bovia in their milk supply. Again, this is still used in Australia. Do your research and what you're feeding your family and putting in your own body to find what brands aren't using this yet in your milk supply. And again, this goes for everything. They're using these mRNA vaccines now in, cattle, chicken. There's, reports that the bird flu is picking up again in some places. So guys, you really have to be aware of what you're putting in your body, what we're eating here. Positive news, places like Mexico replacing 16 million tons of genetically modified corn with native varieties and banning toxic herbicide glyphosate. So I love seeing stuff like this. Certain places are waking up and going back to basics. I'm lucky to have plenty of mates here in Tassie that are all variety of farmers. And, a lot of them aren't using any of this stuff. One of the things they are talking about are these genetically modified seeds and how Monsanto has just completely cornered the food supply of the world now in staggering numbers with their genetically modified seeds that are patented. So as we see Steve Mabogo, if I've pronounced that correctly, talking about that they don't even have the right to grow their own food anymore. They have to buy the seeds every year off Monsanto. And it's now illegal for them to share organic seeds with their neighbor because they have to use these seeds. So we need to push back against this type of stuff because it's already become such a huge contributor to our food supply. It's really scary when you start looking into it all. All right, so another Bill Gates invention here, experiment that I've been sharing on my socials as people are waking up to this sort of stuff is these genetically modified mosquitoes. And some scientists are sounding the alarm about using mosquitoes to vaccinate humans or even to affect the mosquito population, altering genes and doing things in nature we've never done before without any long-term studies or good science around it. With just things that Bill Gates and these big non-government organizations that sit above the law are pushing. There's no accountability. And we've seen these type of things in the past where Bill Gates has used mosquitoes to inject human test subjects with parasites. Now, it's no surprise we've got the former Chief Health Officer, Brett Sutton, who's talking about this stuff on mainstream media and, how it's quite safe and blah, blah, blah. But we definitely need to be looking deeper and pushing back towards this stuff. How do you feel about an Aussie knowing that there might be all these genetically modified mosquitoes released to the wild? And as the media loves to keep us all in fear, we've seen these headlines around Australia where if you're in Australia and it's summer, you'll know that 30 degrees or higher is just a normal summer day. And there's all this fear mongering. with the fires we've seen in California, in LA in the middle of winter, who knows what sort of stunts, and hopefully we don't see any bad fires here as the media trying to push all this, the climate change and the carbon credits, smart cities, it all ties together, and it's a very different argument to concentrating on environmental pollution, microplastics, pesticides, herbicides, chemicals, all the things that we should be worried about going into nature, rather than trying to take away your freedoms via carbon credits. And as I said at the top of this episode here, this was really disappointing to see Trump announcing $500 billion in funding for AI, which again, I'm really worried about how fast and how out of control AI can get, with people like Elon still talking about chipping and implanting people, all tying into these smart cities, central bank digital currencies, all this type of thing. But particularly this mention of how this funding in AI is going to be used for mRNA vaccines to cure everything, including things like cancer. So this is not what we want to see. Let me know what you guys think down below. There's some positives from some countries, and obviously we're waiting to see how the cookie crumbles in other places, and do we actually get that Epstein list released, these criminals brought to justice, and a brighter future, the Great Awakening to continue. We want everyone to be healthy, happy, and have their freedoms, free speech, and all that type of thing. So guys, if you've enjoyed this video, please share it around, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll talk to you again soon. Cheers.